Okay, welcome back. Are we ready to go, Dina? I see we're recording, so I guess that means yes. All right, welcome back. We're going to start our next presentation, which is about implementation. And our presenter is Marcia O'Connor. Marcia O'Connor is the president of AMFM Consulting Group, with over 25 years of experience providing management consulting, professional development, and recruitment services to the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. She works with housing organizations to improve maintenance operations, tenant relationships, and capital planning. Marcia pioneered the first facilities management certificate program at the University of Toronto, where she currently teaches advanced facilities management and disaster recovery planning for building professionals. Welcome, Marcia.
Okay, great. Thanks, Beata, for the great introduction. I want to thank Capital Efficiency for the opportunity to talk about one of my big passions, and that my big passion is with regards to working with tenants and staff and implementing a strategy, i.e. energy management within the housing complex. As Beata said, I started my career actually in affordable housing, if you can believe it. And I've had great leaders and mentors that have helped me over the years to make sure that, you know, what programs and strategies that we all think about that are really important to implement, that we're able to do it. And it's not just, you know, lip service to say, yeah, we got to do this, because we're looking at savings, but not having a plan or strategy with regards to implementing is really, really not the way to go forward. So let's figure out how we're going to get this work done. So if I can get the slides to move to the next one, that would be great. So let me give you a high-level overview of what I hope to cover with you this morning. One is what we're talking about engagement, you know, with regards to how do you build that engagement in your community, in particular dealing with the residents and tenants and your staff and your board and your community. We're talking about a change management process, okay? And that's really fundamental with regards to looking at implementation. Just because you say it's really easy to do doesn't mean it's really easy to do, because unless you explain the process, it's not going to happen. So the other key area that I want to focus our discussion on this morning is internal communication and on defining who, what, where, and when. And then let's talk about how can we reduce use and costs. And, you know, I'm going to tie it into more the discussion that Ian and Derek shared with you earlier, and then we'll talk about training and training of staff and residents. All right, next slide, please. So let's start with engagement. Engagement is really exciting and it's important. If you really think about it, you know, you get a application that's approved for funding, and all of a sudden you're in a position to say, wow, this is really exciting. We need to kind of roll up our sleeves and figure out what we're going to do. But what we need to think about, what is that plan for engagement? So we need to think about what are some strategies to build that community to support. Is it just going to happen by staff saying, hey, we got approval and we're going to start tomorrow? What kind of participation are you looking for? What kind of outcome? You know, what are some of your basic goals with regards to coming up with this implementation plan? And I always find from an engagement perspective, it's really critical to define the staff role in this. You know, they should have a significant role within a housing community to be able to look at engagement with staff or the board or the community as a whole. And then what we're looking at is building that community with regards to what's happening within your housing organization. And hopefully, you know, the ideals will trickle through the rest of your community. Okay, next slide, please. So how do we build strategies, or how do we build that community to support? What I look at first, all right, even before you call a meeting, is what is your goal? What is your goal of implementing this plan. And it's not really a good idea just to talk about, well, we got some money, that the fact that this is why we want to create this synergy within our community. It's really important to talk about why and the benefits to the residents and staff in the community, and also look at where you are today, and also look at what your projected end state is. So if you're looking at energy efficiency, which we've been talking about all morning, if you're looking at changes in lighting or reducing energy costs or utility costs, we start with base and say, we are incurring high energy or utility costs, but this is one of our outcomes. It's important to talk about what kind of changes are going to happen within your building or facility or within your community. And you also need to look at how is a resident going to benefit from this. One of the key themes that we see today more and more is dealing with health and wellness, not just within a housing community. We're seeing it worldwide, right? And it's impacting the lives and the quality of life of our residents. So we need to really kind of focus on why would they want to be involved in this change within their community. What's also important is, and I've seen this in many of the community gatherings or town halls, is the formation of a task group. The task group should have a mandate to say, we're going to be able to get together on a monthly basis or weekly basis, but our mandate is really back to the goal statement. We have an energy plan that we want to implement within our housing complex, right? And this is how we're going to do it. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about for the betterment of the community. There has to be proven benefits and trends. And you know what? Ian and Derek have a lot of evidence, if it's not in your fingertips, with regards to what's happening in your community already. If you need some facts, because you know what? You're dealing with stakeholder group that have various different interests, which I'll cover in a bit. But it's really important to have as much information you have with regards to proven benefits and results. The facts and evidence are going to take you a longer way down the pathway of success rather than making some assumptions, right? Also, setting target dates is really important. What you want to achieve in the short term, medium term, or long term. And when I talk about short term, we need to look at those short, fast wins, because there are going to be individuals within your community and they're going to say, I need to see some fast results or I'm out of here. And you don't want that to happen. What you want is that buy-in as quickly as possible. So be ready to start the implementation phase soon after your kickoff meeting, as soon as you formulate this task group, and don't delay, right? Make sure things are happening right away, because what you're going to do is you're going to create this momentum, and you don't want the momentum to die away. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at is participation for better outcomes. Demonstrate how the residents benefit from the energy initiatives. Again, reducing in energy costs, health and well-being, the quality of life. You want them to be as passionate and committed as you as a staff person or as a housing community. And you want to be able to advocate these changes within your community and your complex, right? More outcome, more participation, more hype, more commitment and synergy within the organization.
Quick question. I sent an invite to you.
Will encourage higher participation and results. Through my experience, it's not because you're creating this hype of passion and commitment that nothing's going to come of it. You're going to have individuals rolling up their sleeve and wanting to participate and wanting to see those results. Next slide, please. What I like looking at when we talk about an initiative like this, and particularly within a housing complex, is defining the staff role. So if there's a staff that's, I'm not going to say their full-time job, because that's not realistic, but if part of their role and responsibility is taking care of this energy plan or initiative and being involved in the implementation phase, they need to help establish some base information. Now, there's great graphs and information that was provided by Derek in his presentation. What I would do is, based on the energy consultants that's working with you, is gather that information. Okay, gather that information and start a baseline to say, here we are today. These are what our projected savings are, and this is where we want to be. You want to develop that verification plan to ascertain that you're going to get those savings that you're projecting as well. So again, it's a target. It's a target or a little bit of a competition, you know, within your housing complex. It says this is what we want to do, and this is what we're going to do together. So you need to have the staff kind of behind the scenes. I'm not saying they need to be in front. They could be behind the scenes, working with the task group to say, let's implement this plan. Let's implement this plan. Let's monitor it. Let's develop it. And let's do a lot of follow-up. So they're there doing the nudge, 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 more so than the leader. I would recommend the task group be the leader within your community and represent your housing complex with regards to this implementation plan. Next slide, please. So how do you raise community awareness? Well, you can do it by posters, you can do it by social media, with regards to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. There's various ways of creating the momentum with regards to what's happening in your community. I've also seen on various housing websites, it's a page dedicated to energy. Here's our energy plan, and here's our mandate, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to share with you. And then there's a small blog sometimes on the website to say, you know, we've been getting some really good questions, and we want to keep the community involved with regards to what's going on, right? What's really important is continuous messaging, and particularly if you have a website or you're using social media, is making sure you got regular updates with regards to the progress that the task group and the community is doing with regards to these energy savings in your implementation plan. Next slide, please. So let me spend a few minutes on change management and internal communication. This is really important to get the fundamentals of what's involved in change. And let's talk about internal communication. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the value proposition. And again, Ian and Derek were wonderful in describing the value proposition. So I'm being a little repetitive here, but I'm just going to pick up the key ones. Is reducing utility costs, and it reduces turnover. You know, if you get the buy-in and commitment, you know, there's no reason why a tenant wouldn't want to stay there for a number of years, and rather than turnover that you might be experiencing in your property or your housing complex. Next slide, please. So change management. And you're saying to me, well, why is Marcia putting change management in here? Well, just because you're asking, I'm going to be simple, that you're going to change a light bulb, okay, to a different kilowatt. You're going to say it's really easy to be able to change a light bulb. But at the end of the day, right, if the illumination from the light is a little dimmer, and someone's expecting a brighter illumination, there's a change that's happened, and we need to deal with that change. Let me give you one other example, and I use this all the time in my teachings, okay, or anyone that I talk to. And I talk about, I'm a left-handed person, right, and I write with my left, but if you ask me to write with my right hand, I wouldn't be able to do it. So look how simple that example I gave you and how difficult it would be for me to write with my right hand. The same applies to energy management or implementing. You need to really understand the change management process. I'm talking about a process, and be able to identify within your community with regards to who are your resistors, your bystanders, who's going to be able to help you and who's going to be able to champion this. Your focus really needs to be on the champions and the helpers to make this plan a reality within your community, but you need to be cognizant of those resistors and bystanders and why they're not buying into this process. Next slide, please. So let's talk about common reasons why people resist change. My example was, you know, writing with my left, and you're asking me to write with my right. I can't do it. I don't know about everyone else. I can't write with two hands. So misunderstanding that change is really important. If someone said I had to write with my right, then I need to know why. And I need the tools to be able to help me transition from a left hand to a right hand. And probably half of you in the room are saying, Marcia, it's really hard, Yeah, but I'm willing to try it if somebody's willing to give me a process. So believe that the change does not make sense. Some people don't say that, right? They said, well, I don't understand why we're changing to a higher efficiency furnace. I don't even know where the furnace is in my building. You're asking me to support some funding and a strategy here. Well, maybe you need to show them that higher efficiency, the furnace that you're planning to replace, right? If they've never seen the mechanical electrical room. There's people that don't like change. It doesn't matter their demographics. They could be millennials, or they could be, I call it the sage generation, age with seasoning. I mean, it varies. So you got to be cognizant and aware with regards to what your participation or participants require. Next slide, please. So all stakeholders may need some hand-holding, okay? And from helping through the change, we need to identify what's driving the decision, to identify those factors. So why isn't somebody agreeing to change? Now, there's so many examples out in the industry and with different housing complexes. You know what? It's really important to sit back and say, can we get some of these best practices in the community? We want this to really work in our community. You don't need to make it complex. I would keep it as simple as possible, and work with your consultants like Derek and Ian with regards to help me understand what you're proposing or what we're going to do in my complex, so that I can convey the same message to our residents, but maybe in a simpler way, to say that yes, this is all for a win-win situation within our housing complex. As I said earlier, dealing with change, it's important to come up with short-term wins, showing something that immediately those utility costs are reducing right away based on a measure that you've identified. Next slide, please. So how do you manage that resistance, right? Again, I bet you many of you have dealt with it within your own housing complex or organization. So I believe in communication. I believe in engagement. I believe in giving facts and information. I also use testimonials from different organizations or tenants and staff that can prove and show great examples and how they benefited from these changes related to energy management. And the other thing is keeping the communication open. I've run into situations where the lack of communication has been there, and then there's a morale issue and say, oh, I guess they don't really care. And of course you care. So you need to keep up those lines of communication. Next slide, please. So let's talk about internal communication. What needs to happen is a vehicle to be able to respond to any questions that your residents and your staff or board or your community might have regarding your energy plan. What I found really, really effective, and it just came up just recently, more effective than ever before, frankly, is coming up with an email account that you can put on your website. It doesn't have to be that staff person specifically, but kind of give it a buzzword and say energy impacts, or mention the nonprofit group and say we're win-win-win, and have that as your email account. Also, what I found useful is a number for texting purposes, right? Or making yourself available on the WhatsApp. And I found these very effective communication vehicles for your tenants, your residents and staff, and anyone in the community having questions related to the energy plan. So if you set up these vehicles, okay, this morning, is that you need to make sure you're responding to those questions on a timely basis. And I'm not saying if somebody threw in a question today that you need to respond to it today. You just need to make sure you do it maybe within 2 business days. All right. So focus on your key messages, and that came out at the beginning with regards to your goals and why you're doing this. I find the effective way of communication is keeping the message consistent and same throughout the whole plan or through your whole process. Next slide, please. Communication: who, what, where, why, and when. I use it all the time. any plan or strategy that I've been asked to implement, I want to know. I ask these key questions all the time. And it's not that I'm a communication guru. I just believe in communication, that communications is critical for the success of your energy plan. There's not one that I would not miss. I would cover all points in dealing with the who, what, where, why, and when. Next slide. So one of the key ways of reducing costs, reducing your use and costs, is developing key performance indicators. And again, best practices out there already, where I totally believe that Ian and Derek and myself can also help you develop these key performance indicators. And what that means in English, right? If you have all these strategies or ideas that you're going to implement, how do you make certain you're going to reach a target that you said you're going to? So you're going to set up these indicators with regards to energy consumption, for example, and you're going to look at your energy bills, for example. If you're making some changes within the community or with surrounding your building, and I saw a question in the chat room. Let's talk about the building. If you're making changes elsewhere, maybe there's changes in the windows or the caulking around the windows. If there are ways that you can set up performance indicators that will show that your residents, their quality of life is improving, and again, you're reducing that energy bills. Next slide, please. Maintenance practices is really important. And it's in here just to remind everyone in the room that the energy plan is not going to happen just because you say you're going to replace an item with a better efficiency or better product. What's really important is ensuring that you have the proper maintenance practices in place. And I'm not preaching to you with regards to making sure there's one in place, but I am. But it's part of your energy strategy with your residents and your staff. It's a good idea to remind them that once the piece of new equipment or strategy has been implemented, that you need to maintain it. Okay, so keep that in mind with regards to any retrofit or upgrades that you're doing related to energy, that the maintenance program is important. Next slide, sorry. So this diagram here probably looks familiar. It's the one that Derek had in his slide. So as I said, what's really important as part of the implementation plan is come up with that baseline, determine what your monthly utility bills are, and track it. So again, using a similar spreadsheet and the data that's coming from your energy consultants, you can start tracking the information, because you need really good data and evidence to be able to communicate that you're implementing different strategies, and you need solid information. I'm talking about evidence that, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, this is when we're doing it, and here are some of the results. Next slide, please. So we're at training staff and residents. I truly believe that training is important for staff and residents. And even though the staff might have been involved in a number of energy programs or initiatives in the past, maybe with another organization, it's always important to come up with some basic understanding of energy management with regards to, the goals, the expected outcomes, how to track the information, different initiatives, and what kind of results it's going to provide you. So you have that knowledge as you go through this process. And then you're going to reap the benefits of what's happening within your community and with your housing complex. So you can look at Google, and I do that all the time, look at different universities and colleges that have different programs and initiatives or that's available. In fact, I was asked the other day about an energy program, and it was in a municipal organization that had a housing unit. And they had asked with regards to, they were looking at an energy program for onboarding purposes. They said, what kind of onboarding course would you recommend for tenants that are joining or becoming a member or a tenant within a housing complex? If we already have an energy program in place, what kind of onboarding would you provide that tenant? Isn't that a great question? So lots of great ideas out there with regards to training initiatives for staff and residents. Next slide, please. So let's look at the long-term benefits. You know, we start with a plan. We already have the plan approved. We start thinking about what are our goals, what are our current state, what do we want to be able to accomplish, what do we want to look like. We're looking at engagement, you know, and we got to kind of look at for the tenants and the residents, and we got to look at the quality of life and say, this is the reason why we're doing this within our community. And we got to be pretty proud of what we're going to be able to accomplish in the short term, medium term, as well as the long term. Next slide. So on that note, I want to thank everyone for listening to me. And if you have any questions, I think Beatrice said that we can probably take a couple. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marcia, for that great presentation. We do have one question, and the question is, does the approach for engagement change based on the ownership model? So a co-op or a nonprofit or a condo?
What a fabulous question. I'm asked this all the time. You know what it comes down to is terminology. You know, I've worked for co-ops, I've worked for condos, and I've worked for nonprofits. And I find that the buy-in implementation is using the proper words in your presentation.